He stood frozen in the hallway, a scholarship letter in one hand, and a police report in the other. 30 minutes ago, Kendrick was praised as a genius on stage. Now campus security surrounded him, whispering about a missing laptop. No one asked questions. No one read the fact. They just saw his skin, and in exactly 1 minute, everything he'd earned could disappear. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Kendrick Allen's sneakers squeaked faintly against the polished marble floor as he stepped into the grand lecture hall of Westbridge University, an Ivy League institution older than the country itself. The ceiling arched like a cathedral, beams of morning light spilling through tall stained glass windows patterned with mathematical symbols. The scent of polished wood and chalk clung to the air. He paused at the door, clutching a battered leather satchel, a hand-me-down from his father, and scanned the rows of students already seated. Not a single face looked like his. At 17, Kendrick was a quiet anomaly. His hoodie sleeves were rolled up just enough to reveal the faint burn marks from nights spent soldering his own electronics, a hobby between problem sets. Southside Chicago wasn't a place Westbridge recruiters typically scouted for prodigies, but Kendrick's raw math talent, proven by competitions and an early admission test no one else had passed in years, had landed him here. He had imagined this moment for months, but now, surrounded by polished laptops and private school accents, the fantasy felt brittle. He made his way to a seat in the back row, noticing how students glanced at him then away, as if trying to solve a puzzle they didn't want to admit existed. Their branded sweatshirts and designer notebooks glimmered under the lights. Kendrick placed a plain spiral pad on his desk and opened it to a blank page. He always worked best by hand. At the front of the hall, Professor Aldridge arranged his notes. A tall, silver-haired man in a three-piece suit. Aldridge had the kind of presence that filled a room without effort. His reputation as a gatekeeper of the pure math track preceded him. Kendrick had read about him online. Brilliant, exacting, rumored to have tenure offers from Europe. The man didn't look up as students filtered in. The lecture began with roll call. Each name was answered crisply. Double-barreled surnames, accents from prep schools in New England and California. When Aldridge reached Kendrick Allen, his eyes barely flickered to the back row. He paused, mouth tightening, then moved on to the next name without calling for a response. Kendrick hesitated, lips parting to speak, but decided against it. The professor's eyes were already elsewhere, scanning his note. Kendrick sat straighter, heart tapping against his ribs. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe Aldridge had misread the list. Still, the omission landed like a weight in his chest. In Southside classrooms, teachers had mispronounced his name all the time, sometimes on purpose. He'd learned to pick his battles. Aldridge launched into the lecture with the precision of a metronome, chalk skimming across the board. Today we'll begin by reviewing the core structures of multivariable calculus, starting with. His voice rolled like distant thunder. Kendrick scribbled notes furiously, even though he already knew most of the material by heart. The students around him whispered softly, some scrolling on their tablets. A girl in front twirled her pen, and half listened. A boy across the aisle leaned back, arms crossed, nodding only when Aldridge glanced his way. Kendrick's handwriting quickened, equations spilling into margins, forming patterns he'd seen in his sleep since age 12. As the lecture deepened, Aldridge turned from definitions to a single problem he'd written on the far right of the board. A maze of nested integrals and vector fields. This, Aldridge said, isn't in your textbook. Consider it an appetizer for your minds. He looked across the hall with an expectant pause. No one volunteered. The problem was intimidating, but Kendrick had seen a version of it before in an old MIT journal his neighbor had salvaged from a library bin. He could already see the solution forming, but he stayed silent, pen tapping the desk. Aldridge waited another beat. Anyone? His tone sharpened. Surely someone in this class of the best and brightest can attempt it. A tall student in the second row raised a tentative hand, walked to the board, and began scribbling. He worked through 2 lines before hesitating. I'm not sure how to. Sit down. Aldridge cut him off, irritation flashing. The student slumped back to his seat. A girl tried next. Her work dissolved into crossed-out steps. She flushed red, shook her head, and retreated. Aldridge exhaled through his nose. This is basic. You'll find the same structures in graduate texts. Does no one grasp the underlying principle? Kendrick's stomach knotted. He could solve it. He wanted to. But he remembered his mother's warning before he left Chicago. Don't show off. Show them you belong. But don't make them mad. Her voice echoed in his head, a low hum of caution. He kept his eyes on the desk, scribbling the answer in his notebook instead. Lines of integrals fell into place like dominoes. Aldridge scanned the room again, gaze sweeping over rows of pale, nervous faces. Then his eyes landed on Kendrick. It wasn't a curious glance. It was the kind of look that stripped away layers, assessing, doubting, testing. Kendrick felt the stare like a hand on his shoulder. Aldridge's lips curled, just slightly, as if an idea had occurred to him. He picked up the chalk, tapped it against the board, and turned. You, he said. The word rang in the hall, echoing off stone and wood. Every head turned. Kendrick blinked. Me? His voice was steady but low. Yes, you. Aldridge's tone was neutral, but something under it, an edge of condescension, made it sound like a dare. Let's see what you can do. Kendrick's notebook trembled slightly in his hands. He could feel the weight of 100 eyes. For a second he thought about staying seated, shrugging it off, pretending he didn't hear. But another voice, this time his father's, cut through. If they don't expect you to shine, that's exactly when you do. He rose slowly, every movement deliberate, the scrape of his chair loud in the hush. His hoodie felt suddenly too warm. Steps toward the front felt longer than they were. As he approached the board, Aldridge handed him the chalk without looking at him directly. Show us, he murmured. Kendrick took the chalk, fingers brushing dust off its tip. The board loomed before him, the problem like a living thing. The class waited, breaths. Behind him someone whispered, not quite quietly enough, this'll be good. Kendrick tightened his grip on the chalk. His pulse was steady now. This was math. This was the one place where, at least on paper, the rules didn't care about skin. He raised the chalk to the board and stopped. From the corner of his eye, he caught Aldridge's reflection in the window. The professor wasn't watching the math. He was watching Kendrick. His expression wasn't one of anticipation, but of something colder, curiosity laced with doubt, like a scientist testing a hypothesis he expected to fail. Kendrick realized, with a jolt, that this wasn't about the problem on the board. It was about him. He drew in a slow breath, the chalk hovering just above the first integral sign. All around him, the room had gone still. And then Aldridge said softly but clearly enough for everyone to hear, "You, try it." The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been, heavier than chalk, or math, or even the problem itself. A challenge cloaked as an invitation, a line drawn between what Kendrick knew he could do and what they believed he couldn't. The chalk felt like a weightless stone in Kendrick's hand, cool and powdery, a single line between humiliation and vindication. The room was a vacuum. Even the shuffle of notebooks had ceased. He stared at the maze of symbols Professor Aldridge had drawn. Triple integrals nested in a vector field, swirling like a hurricane, derivatives curling off the edges. It looked like chaos to most, but to Kendrick it was a melody. He could almost hear the rhythm of it, a sequence of steps, a pattern hidden beneath the noise. He drew the first line, his handwriting small but precise, then another, and another. Each symbol landed as if it had always been there, waiting for him. The murmurs behind him flickered into silence. Students leaned forward, laptops forgot. Aldridge watched without blinking. The faintest smirk tugged at his mouth, as if waiting for Kendrick to trip. But Kendrick didn't. He wrote faster, chalk clicking against the board in a steady beat. The integrals collapsed into neat, manageable pieces. He factored terms, rotated axes, converted the problem into cylindrical coordinates, a trick he'd taught himself after studying obscure math journals in the public library. He paused, stepped back, and scanned his work. He was only halfway through but already ahead of where the other students had failed. He glanced sideways at Aldridge, expecting maybe a nod. Instead he saw only that same cool curiosity, as though the professor were watching a magician perform and looking for the trap door. Someone behind him whispered, "Wait, is he then cut off?" Kendrick went on. He didn't need to think anymore. The math moved through him like muscle memory, like breathing. This was his refuge, the one place in his life where rules made sense. Numbers didn't care where he came from. He reached the final line, the one no one else had approached. A few more strokes and the problem unraveled, the answer falling cleanly into place at the bottom corner of the board. He underlined it once, set the chalk down, and stepped back. Silence. He turned to face the room. Rows of eyes stared at him, not with admiration, but with something else. Unease. Disbelief. A few students shifted in their seats. One boy near the front folded his arms tighter. A girl blinked, then forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Aldridge stood very still. His hands were clasped behind his back. Interesting, he said finally. His tone was clipped, unreadable. Show your intermediate steps. Kendrick gestured to the board. They're right there. Aldridge tilted his head, scanning the work. Yes. So they are. He let the pause stretch, the air tightening. Remarkably efficient. Where did you learn that technique? Kendrick hesitated. Books. Practice. Books, Aldridge repeated, as though the word itself were suspect. I see. He turned to the class. Any questions? No one spoke. Kendrick felt his heartbeat slowing. A wash of relief rising. But it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like walking into a room you thought was empty, and realizing someone was watching from the dark. The lecture resumed, Aldridge snapping back into his rhythm as if nothing had happened. Kendrick returned to his seat, the whisper of chalk still echoing in his mind. His fingers trembled slightly as he closed his notebook. When the class ended, students filed out in small groups. Kendrick lingered, packing his bag slowly. Snatches of conversation drifted around him. That was insane. No one just knows that off the top of their head. Do you think he... They fell silent when he passed. Claire, the blonde girl from the third row, gave him a small nod as she left. It might have been respect. It might have been curiosity. He couldn't tell. Out in the courtyard, sunlight hit the stone arches, throwing sharp shadows across the grass. Kendrick sat on a bench, his bag at his feet, and watched students cluster together. He could almost see the narrative forming in their heads. It wasn't "look at that brilliant kid." It was "how did he pull that off?" He pulled out his phone and opened his email. Nothing from his academic advisor. Nothing from Aldridge. Just a notice about the math club meeting, and a cafeteria menu update. The sense of unease grew. At dinner, the whispers followed him. In the dining hall, two boys at the next table glanced at him, then bent their heads together. He caught the words competition and prep course. Another said, "No way he," and stopped when Kendrick looked up. He kept eating. Chicken gone cold. Mashed potatoes dense as paste. The hum of conversation was louder than usual. But every so often he caught the subtle shift, a sudden hush when he passed, eyes darting away. Later that night, he retreated to his dorm. The room was small, a single bed, and a desk pressed against the window. Southside had been noisy. Trains rattling. Sirens at night. Here it was quiet, but the silence felt heavier. He opened his notebook and began scribbling equations to calm himself, but the numbers blurred. He closed it again, staring out at the quad. Students moved like shadows under the lamplight. His phone buzzed. A notification from the campus social network. A post tagged anonymous. He tapped it open. The screen glowed. A single line of text, bold against the white background. No way that kid solved that without cheating. Underneath, a thread of comments already growing. Exactly. Who even is he? Affirmative action much. That he had the answer beforehand. Kendrick stared at the screen, the glow reflecting in his eyes. It wasn't shock, it was the slow burn of recognition. He'd seen this before in different forms. Teachers assuming he'd copied, contest judges double-checking his work. The implication was always the same: if you're brilliant and black, you must be cheating. But something about this felt different. The timing, the precision, the way it appeared, just hours after class ended. Someone hadn't just doubted him. They'd decided to plant that doubt, like a seed. He scrolled further. One comment stopped him cold. Check the prof's face when he was at the board. He knew. Kendrick's thumb hovered above the screen. He read the comment again, and again. It wasn't just students. Someone was suggesting Aldridge himself might have been part of it, or at least expecting Kendrick to fail. He set the phone down, heart thudding. Across the quad, lights in the faculty offices glimmered. One window on the top floor was still lit. The silhouette of a man moved inside, pacing. For a moment, Kendrick thought he recognized the tall frame of Aldridge. But the curtain fell, and the light went dark. The post had already racked up dozens of likes. The thread kept growing. Kendrick closed his laptop. He didn't know who had started it. He didn't know how far it would go. But he knew one thing: this wasn't gonna stay inside a classroom. He reached for his notebook again, flipping to a fresh page, as if writing something anything could anchor him. But his pen hovered uselessly. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Somewhere in the distance, A train horn echoed, faint, like a memory of home. He turned back to the phone one last time. Another comment had appeared under the anonymous post. Bet he won't last the semester. Kendrick's jaw tightened. The screen dimmed. The anonymous post hadn't died overnight. It had multiplied. By morning, Kendrick's phone was buzzing with notifications from the campus social network. Every time he opened the app, the thread had grown longer. Dozens of comments. Then hundreds. Some were snide jokes. Others outright accusations. Someone had even attached a blurry picture of him at the chalkboard. His back to the camera, captioned, "Genius or fraud." Kendrick sat at his desk, hunched over a bowl of uneaten cereal, watching the comments pile up. The glow of the screen lit his face in the dim dorm room. His roommate, a tall lacrosse player named Brent, scrolled through his own phone on the opposite bed. "You're trending, man," Brent muttered without looking up. Kendrick glanced at him. Not in a good way. Brent shrugged, half smiling. Better than being invisible. Kendrick turned back to the screen. Invisible. The word sat heavy in his stomach. He thought about his first day in Aldridge's class, about how he'd been skipped over at roll call. Invisible had been safer than this. By the time he walked to his next lecture, heads were turning. People nudged each other as he passed. Some smirked. Others stared like he was an exhibit. Outside the math building, a pair of students held up their phones as he climbed the steps, pretending to check notifications, but clearly filming. Inside the lecture hall, Kendrick tried to keep his head down. He set his notebook on the desk, pen poised, and stared at the board as Aldridge scribbled equations. But the energy in the room had shifted. Students whispered more openly now, glancing at him, then back to their screens. A faint clicking noise behind him made him turn. A girl in the back row was holding her phone up, recording. When he caught her eye, she smiled tightly, as though daring him to say something. He didn't. He just faced forward and kept writing. The lecture bled into the next. Kendrick moved from one classroom to another, like a shadow under scrutiny. He started noticing details he'd missed before, the way people angled their bodies when he walked by, the pause in conversations when he entered a room. Even Claire, who'd nodded at him after the chalkboard incident, seemed more guarded now. She still smiled when they crossed paths, but it was softer, like she was afraid to be seen choosing a side. The first real blow came from someone he hadn't expected. Kendrick's academic advisor, Dr. Bowman, had been warm during orientation, almost paternal. A black man in his 50s, Bowman had told Kendrick he reminded him of his younger self. Hungry, brilliant, out of place. "My door's always open," he'd said. But when Kendrick stopped by that morning, the door was half closed. Bowman looked up from his computer when Kendrick knocked. "Go, Kendrick," he said, his smile thin. "Did you have an appointment?" "No. Kendrick hesitated. "I thought we could talk." "About what?" Bowman's tone was neutral, but something about his eyes was different. Less warm, more guarded. Kendrick stepped inside. "There's been stuff online. About me. I didn't—" "I've seen it," Bowman interrupted. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "The department's seen it too." Kendrick felt his chest tighten. "Yeah." Bowman sighed. "And it's not a good look, Kendrick. People are asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind you don't want asked." Bowman's gaze flicked to the door, then back. "Where you learned what you know. Whether your test scores were—" He trailed off, then said softly. "Flag." The word hit like a slap. "Flagged?" Kendrick repeated. "You think my scores were fake?" "I'm saying people are looking." Bowman's voice was lower now, almost pleading. "You're under a microscope. I've seen this before. It doesn't matter how clean your record is. The suspicion alone can stick. Be careful." Kendrick stood there, hands at his sides, feeling like the floor had tilted. "I thought you believed in me." Bowman looked away. "Belief doesn't always matter here." Kendrick left without another word. That evening, he sat alone in the library. He'd chosen a corner table behind the stacks, far from the main study area, but even here he felt watched. Across the room, two students sat with their laptops angled toward him. One of them raised his phone briefly, like he was checking the time. Kendrick pulled out his notebook and tried to work on the problem set Aldridge had assigned. His pencil hovered above the paper. Nothing came. The numbers blurred. He remembered the first time someone had accused him of cheating. 7th grade, state math competition. He'd finished the test 10 minutes early, handed it in, and walked out to find the judges whispering. One of them had said, "No way he did that." without a crib sheet. They'd searched his pockets. Nothing. But the doubt had lingered anyway. Now years later it was the same script on a bigger stage. When the library closed, Kendrick walked back across campus. The quad was lit by lamplight, trees casting long shadows. His phone buzzed with another notification, a new post under the genius or fraud thread. This one wasn't just a comment, it was a screenshot of an email. The subject line read, "Verification request Kendrick Allen." The sender was redacted, but the body of the email was visible enough. Given recent events, please confirm the validity of Allen's entrance exam scores. He may have received unauthorized assistance. Kendrick stopped walking, the glow of the screen reflecting in his eyes. Someone in the faculty had actually written that. It wasn't just students now. This was inside the system. His phone buzzed again. A direct message from an unknown number. Careful. They're looking for a reason. He stared at the message, heart pounding. The campus felt suddenly colder, the lamplight harsher. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and quickened his pace. When he reached his dorm, Brent was there, scrolling his phone. "Dude," Brent said, looking up. "You see this?" He held up his screen. Another thread had appeared, a clip of Kendrick in Aldridge's class, solving the problem at the board, captioned, "Prodigy or plant." The view count was climbing fast. Kendrick dropped his bag. "Great," he muttered. "You're like a celebrity now," Brent said. "But like the bad kind." Kendrick sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. "This isn't about math anymore." "Nope," Brent said. "This is about them trying to figure out how you fit into their story." The next morning, Kendrick received an email from the department. It was short, formal, no greeting. "Please report to the Dean of Mathematics office at 3 p.m. today for a discussion regarding academic verification." He read it twice. At lunch he sat alone at a corner table in the cafeteria. Claire approached hesitantly, tray in hand. "Can I sit?" she asked. Kendrick nodded. She set down her tray, glancing around before speaking. "I'm sorry about all this. People here," she lowered her voice, "they don't like surprises, especially not from someone like you." Kendrick raised an eyebrow. "Someone like me? I mean..." She flushed. "You know what I mean." He stared at her for a long moment, then looked away. "Yeah, I know. They're saying the dean might..." She trailed off, then said softly, "Be careful." Kendrick pushed his tray away, appetite gone. "Thank." At 3 p.m., he walked to the administrative building. The hallway smelled of old wood and disinfectant, portraits of past deans lining the walls. The receptionist barely glanced at him, as she gestured to a door at the end. He paused outside the office, hand on the knob. Through the frosted glass he could see the silhouette of someone pacing. Inside, the Dean of Mathematics waited. A tall woman with iron gray hair and a severe suit. Papers were stacked neatly on her desk. She didn't smile when he entered. "Kendrick Allen," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite. "Sit." He sat. She folded her hands on the desk. "I'll be direct," she said. "Concerns have been raised about your academic record." Kendrick kept his voice steady. "Concerns? Your entrance scores, your performance in class, the speed at which you solved Professor Aldridge's problem." Her eyes met his. "Some believe you may have received assistance, or worse." Kendrick's stomach clenched. "I didn't." "That may be," she said, "but perception matters here as much as reality." He swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" She slid a paper across the desk. "We're requiring a verification assessment. Independent, supervised. No materials, no calculators. You'll be given advanced problems. If you're as gifted as you appear, you'll pass easily." Kendrick stared at the paper. His own name printed at the top, bold letters like a charge sheet. "When?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning," the dean said. 8 sharp. He looked up at her. "And if I refuse?" Her expression didn't change. "Then we'll have to reconsider your placement here." Kendrick felt the room tilt again. He thought of his mother, his father, Southside, everything he'd worked for. He thought of the anonymous posts, the whispers, the dean waited, expression unreadable. Kendrick's hands curled into fists on his knees. Section ends here. Kendrick is about to face a high-stakes verification assessment that could decide his future. The test room wasn't a classroom at all. It was a windowless conference space in the basement of the mathematics building, lit by humming fluorescent lights. The walls were bare except for a clock that ticked too loudly, a constant metronome. On the long table sat a single stack of papers and a pencil, No calculator, no scratch paper beyond what was stapled to the packet. Kendrick was escorted in by a secretary who gave him a polite but blank smile, then shut the door without a word. He stood alone for a moment, taking in the sterile space. The air smelled faintly of chalk dust and disinfectant. He sat down, the chair legs screeching softly against the tile, and stared at the packet. His name was printed at the top, in bold type. Beneath it, a line of text: verification assessment, level 5. Level 5. He had never heard of that before. Westbridge's advanced placement exams only went up to level 4. He flipped to the first page. The problem stared back at him, a labyrinth of partial differential equations, boundary conditions unlike anything taught in the course. He turned to the next page, a dense matrix of nonlinear systems. The third page was worse. Proofs of theorems he'd only glimpsed in research papers. He set his jaw. It was supposed to be a verification test, but this wasn't verification. This was trial by fire. Kendrick closed his eyes for a second, picturing his mother's kitchen back in Chicago, the smell of coffee and warm bread on mornings before a big competition. Breathe, she'd told him. Slow down and let the numbers talk. He opened his eyes and picked up the pencil. He started with the third page, the proofs. If he could nail the hardest problems first, the rest would look less intimidating. His handwriting was neat, disciplined, every line of logic stacked on the one before. The clock's tick became background noise. The equations stopped being traps and became a kind of music, familiar and strange at once. Minutes bled into hours. Kendrick's pencil flew. He converted systems, rotated frames of reference, introduced substitutions so elegant even his old high school math coach would have blinked. He filled margins with auxiliary work, arrows crisscrossing like battle plans. Sweat gathered at his temples, but he ignored it. In a faculty lounge upstairs, the whispers had already started. It's ridiculous, a professor muttered to another. He's a freshman. They've given him the hardest test we have. The other replied. If he's real, he'll survive it. And if he's not, then we'll know. A third voice joined, low and sardonic. Affirmative action's a slippery slope. The admissions office wanted a headline. This is what happens. Back in the basement, Kendrick turned to the final page. The last problem was unlike anything he'd ever seen. An integral equation disguised as a physical model. No hint of a starting point. For a moment his pencil hovered. He stared at it, heartbeat steady. Then something clicked. A substitution hidden in plain sight. A symmetry he recognized from an obscure article he'd read late one night at the public library. He began to write, the problem collapsing like a house of cards. When he finished, the clock on the wall read 11:58. He'd been in the room nearly 4 hours. His pencil tip had worn down to a stub. He placed it carefully beside the test packet and sat back, exhaling. The door opened. The secretary reappeared, her expression unreadable. Done? Kendrick nodded. She took the packet without looking at it. You'll be notified, she said. Her tone was clipped, rehearsed. That's it? Kendrick asked. That's it. She closed the door behind her, leaving him alone for a moment before he stood and walked out. Upstairs, the lounge conversation continued. He finished? Apparently. That fast? I told you if he's cheating we'll catch it. No one walks out of that test clean. Kendrick walked across campus under a sky thick with low clouds. The quad felt colder than usual, the stone buildings looming heavier. He slipped his hands into his hoodie pocket, thinking of how the secretary hadn't even looked him in the eye. Verification test, they'd called it. But verification wasn't supposed to feel like being put on trial. Back in his dorm room, Brent looked up from his laptop. How'd it go? Kendrick dropped his bag. Like they set me up to fail. Yeah, but did you? Kendrick sank onto his bed. No. He rubbed his forehead. I think I got it all, but they're not telling me.
They're probably freaking out, Brent said. If you passed, you'll make them look stupid.
Kendrick lay back staring at the ceiling. If I pass. 2 days crawled by. No email, no phone call, nothing from the department. In class, Aldridge lectured as usual, but his eyes slid over Kendrick as though he wasn't there. Students still whispered, still recorded him on their phones, but the tone had shifted from curiosity to something sharper, expectation, maybe even hunger, waiting for him to slip. On the second evening, Kendrick checked his email again. Nothing. He shut his laptop and stared out the window. The quad was bathed in twilight, students drifting between buildings like shadows. His phone buzzed. A message from Claire, Have you heard yet? He typed back, no. Her reply came almost instantly. Be careful. He frowned at the screen, thumbs hovering. Careful of what, he almost typed, but didn't. Across campus, in the faculty offices, another conversation unfolded. We can't keep him in the advanced group, one voice said. He hasn't failed. He hasn't passed either. And until we're it's temporary, the third voice cut in. We can't risk the optics. The decision was made before the test had even been graded. The next morning, Kendrick sat in the front row of the advanced calculus seminar, notebook open, pen poised. He was determined to keep his head down, to outlast whatever they were trying to do him. The professor walked in. A man Kendrick had barely spoken to, not Aldridge but Dr. Heston, who oversaw the group project. Heston set his briefcase on the desk and cleared his throat. Before we begin, Heston said, I have an announcement. He didn't look at Kendrick. Effective immediately, the composition of the advanced calculus group project has been adjusted. Some students have been reassigned to better accommodate scheduling. Kendrick felt a cold weight in his stomach. Heston continued, reading from a paper. Mr. Kendrick Allen will no longer be participating in the project at this time. Please see your email for reassignment details. The room went silent. A few students exchanged glances. One boy smirked. Kendrick sat perfectly still, pen frozen in his hand. Heston launched into the lecture as though nothing had happened. Kendrick didn't hear a word. His phone buzzed once in his pocket, a notification from his email. He didn't check it. He just sat there staring at the board, the edges of his vision blurring. Outside the window, the clouds had darkened. The email sat unopened in Kendrick's inbox for nearly an hour. It glared at him from the top of the screen. Advanced Calculus Group Reassignment Notice. He stared at it, arms folded across his chest, the cold light of his dorm desk lamp washing everything in sterile yellow. Brent had already asked once cautiously, You gonna read it? Kendrick had only shaken his head. When he finally opened it, the words hit harder than he expected. Not because of what they said, but because of how carefully they avoided saying anything at all. Due to faculty adjustments regarding collaborative timelines and project load balancing, you are no longer required to participate in Group Project A. Please consider this a scheduling optimization, not a reflection of your academic standing. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement that he'd built the core of the group's original model himself. A new proof method he'd spent the last 2 weeks refining. His ideas gone with the click of a faculty member's keyboard. The next line made his stomach tighten. You have been reassigned to independent study status until further notice. Independent study. The academic equivalent of exile. The next morning, Kendrick sat in the back of the same lecture hall where his journey had begun. This time, there was no problem on the board. Just Professor Heston's bland PowerPoint clicking forward while students murmured and pretended to care. Kendrick watched from the back as his former groupmates, Claire included, sat at the front, clustered around laptops whispering. No one met his eye. Heston didn't mention the reassignment. Neither did anyone else. As if Kendrick had quietly disappeared, folded into the walls. When the class ended, Claire lingered behind. She glanced back once, as if weighing something, then turned away before Kendrick could say anything. Outside, fall was beginning to touch the edges of the trees. Leaves flickered red and orange across the quad. Kendrick sat on the steps outside the math building, watching students pass in small clusters, groups within groups, none of which included him. He opened his notebook, flipping to the page where his original model sat in precise handwriting. It was a new approach to optimizing gradient descent algorithms. Something he'd adapted from machine learning structures and applied to calculus-based prediction models. No one else in the group had understood it at first. But when he'd explained it, even Claire had said, this could change the entire framework. Now it was out of his hands. A few days later, he passed the project room. The door was slightly ajar, laughter echoing from inside. He paused, not close enough to be noticed, but just near enough to hear snippets of conversation. I think the symmetry assumption's still too loose, one student said. Didn't Kendrick say to constrain it through second-order limits? Claire's voice. A pause. Then someone else. Well, it's our model now. Let's not overcomplicate it. Kendrick stepped back into the hallway, heart sinking. He walked away before they could see him, their words trailing behind like invisible bruises. At night he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling of his dorm, thinking about everything he hadn't said. How much of the model was his, how none of them would have even gotten past the first stages without it. But something held him back. It wasn't fear. It was exhaustion, a kind that didn't come from the body, but from constantly having to prove you belonged in a room you already earned. He tried to focus on his new assignments. Independent study meant working alone, answering to no group, no deadlines. At least in theory, but when Kendrick emailed his new faculty contact for guidance, he received no reply. When he followed up, the automated out-of-office message responded, "On sabbatical, please redirect inquiries to admin, at math desk." He sent the email. No one answered. The silence was deliberate. In the dining hall, students spoke more freely now. The whispers weren't whispered anymore. "I heard he was cut for academic dishonesty." No, it was attitude. He clashed with faculty. "My brother said it was because of internal scoring policies. Like he never really qualified for advanced placement." Each time Kendrick heard a new version of the story, it was further from the truth. He walked through the campus like a ghost of himself, his name reshaped by everyone but him. On Thursday, he walked past the department bulletin board and stopped. There, pinned at eye level, was a printed flyer. Advanced Calculus Cohort Project Showcase. Final presentations. Friday at 4 p.m. His name was not on the list of presenters, but the group he'd started with. Claire, Lucas, Mallory, and Dinesh. He stared at the flyer, a pressure building behind his eyes. Then, without thinking, he took out his phone and snapped a photo. He didn't know why. Maybe to prove to himself it was real. Maybe because, deep down, he'd always known this was coming. The next day at 3:58 p.m., Kendrick sat 2 rows from the back in room 402. Hood up, notebook in his lap. Blending into the crowd. The lights were dimmed. The projector hummed. Houston stood at the front, greeting faculty and other students filing in. Kendrick kept his head down. At 4:04 the group took the stage. Claire stood to the side, slightly apart from the others. Lucas handled the intro. "We wanted to explore alternative pathways to optimizing high-dimensional spaces using new calculus-based models." Kendrick's heart stilled. On the projector screen appeared a slide titled "Reverse Optimization in Gradient Maps via Constrained Second-Order Differentiation." It was his title, word for word. The next slide showed a diagram, the same one he had sketched weeks ago in his notebook, right down to the color scheme. His hand clenched around the pencil in his lap. They presented every element of his approach, the reformulated equation structure, the early simulation results, the core assumptions, all without a single mention of his name. No credit, no footnote, not even a vague nod. He looked around the room. No one seemed to notice. Or if they did, they didn't care. At the end, Houston applauded. "Elegant work," he said. "A fresh take on a very complex problem. High-level application with practical implications." The group smiled. Claire didn't. Kendrick stayed seated as the room emptied, waiting for them to file out. Claire was the last to leave. He stood, stepped quietly into her path. She stopped. Their eyes met. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Kendrick asked, voice low. Claire's expression flickered. Guilt, hesitation, then a quick mask of defense. "I didn't know they were going to use it without credit. I thought you'd be presenting with us before everything happened."
"I built that model," Kendrick said. "You all know I did."
Claire didn't argue. She just looked away. "You should talk to Heston." He shook his head. "What's the point?" A pause. "I'm sorry," she said, so softly, he barely heard it. Then she walked away. Kendrick stood alone in the hallway, as the last echoes of footsteps faded. He pulled out his phone, opened his notebook app, typed, "They took it. My work. My name." And then, something unexpected happened.
His phone buzzed.
Kendrick stared at the message on his phone long after the screen dimmed. "Saw the presentation. They used your theorem. I have proof." It came from an unknown number. He waited, expecting a follow-up, but none came. When he texted back, "Who is this?" there was no reply. Only the pulsing gray ellipsis. Then silence. He sat in the dorm room's thin lamplight. Notebook open but blank. Proof. Someone had proof. The word alone felt like oxygen. But it also felt like bait. Brent came in late from practice, sweaty and distracted, tossing his cleats onto the floor. "You okay?" he asked, not looking up. "They stole my work," Kendrick said quietly. Brent paused mid-motion, met his eyes. "I know. I'm filing a complaint," Kendrick added. "Tonight." Brent hesitated.
You think they'll listen?
"They'll have to." Kendrick closed his notebook. "It's in writing now. They can't ignore it." He spent the next 3 hours drafting the formal complaint. Every line of it was measured, precise, like one of his proofs. He attached screenshots of his notes, timestamps, and the original drafts of the theorem he'd built. He cited the group's presentation title, his title and diagrams identical to his. He included the anonymous message, redacted but visible enough to suggest corroboration. By the time he hit submit, it was nearly 3 a.m. He closed the laptop, leaned back in his chair, and exhaled. For the first time in days, he felt a flicker of control. The response came faster than he expected. The next afternoon, an email from the Office of Academic Integrity appeared in his inbox. The subject line read, "Case Review Outcome." Kendrick clicked it open. Heart hammering. "Dear Mr. Allen," it began, "we appreciate your commitment to academic excellence and have conducted a preliminary review of your concerns. After careful evaluation, we have found no evidence of misconduct. Collaborative work may naturally resemble prior drafts. We consider this matter closed." He read it twice. The language was polite, clinical, hollow. No evidence of misconduct. Matter closed. He scrolled to the bottom. There was no appeal link. No next step. Only a signature, Dean of Academic Integrity. Kendrick's fingers hovered over the keyboard, then dropped to his lap. He felt the weight of the email like a stone in his chest. They hadn't even asked to see his notebook. Brent came in as Kendrick sat frozen at the desk. "What'd they say?" "They found nothing," Kendrick said flatly. Brent frowned. "But you sent them everything. They don't care." Kendrick's voice cracked for the first time in weeks. "It doesn't matter what I prove on paper." Brent was silent for a moment. "You gonna let it go?" "No." Kendrick's eyes flicked back to the screen. "No, I'm not." The next day, Kendrick picked up a copy of the campus paper from the student union. The headline caught him immediately. "Westbridge Math Team Unveils Groundbreaking Model at Advanced Calculus Showcase." Below it, a photo of Claire, Lucas, Mallory, and Dinesh smiling in front of their projector screen. The caption read, "Team Pioneers a Novel Approach to Optimization." Kendrick's name wasn't mentioned once. He flipped through the article, scanning for any footnote or reference. Nothing. The piece described the theorem in glowing terms, calling it innovative and student-driven. It quoted Professor Heston praising the group's collaborative genius. Kendrick folded the paper, fingers trembling. In the margins of the article, someone had scrawled with a pen, probably a student reading before him, "Legends in the Making." He stuffed the paper into his bag and walked out of the student union, jaw tight. In Aldridge's lecture that afternoon, Kendrick sat in his usual seat, eyes fixed on the board but not seeing it. Aldridge spoke about Stokes' theorem, chalk squealing in arcs, but Kendrick heard only fragments. Around him, students typed notes or scrolled through their feeds. Every so often, a phone angled discreetly toward him, recording. During a break, Claire approached his desk. "Kendrick," she said softly. He looked up, expression flat. "What?" "I didn't know they were going to." She stopped, glancing at the students around them. "Not like this." "You're in the article," Kendrick said, smiling. "I tried to say something," she murmured. "Heston told me not to muddy the narrative." Kendrick closed his notebook. "Then you're part of it." Claire's mouth opened, then shut. She turned away without another word. That night, Kendrick returned to his dorm to find a thin envelope slid under his door. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper typed on an old-fashioned typewriter. "Don't push it. You'll lose." No signature. He stared at the note, pulse thudding in his ears. The paper smelled faintly of stale coffee. The edges were frayed, as if torn from a larger sheet. Brent looked up from his desk as Kendrick held it out. "What the hell is that?" "Someone's warning me," Kendrick said. "Or threatening you." Kendrick laid the note on the desk, smoothing it flat. "Tenured," he murmured. "It has to be someone tenured. Someone who thinks they're untouchable." Brent frowned. "What are you gonna do?" Kendrick stared at the words again. "Don't push it. You'll lose." For the first time, the message of the entire system felt naked. It wasn't just about math anymore. It was about power. About making sure someone like him knew his place, no matter how clean his proofs were. He slid the note back into the envelope, placed it in his notebook, and closed the cover. He wasn't sure what scared him more, that someone had sent it, or that they might be right. 2 hours later, as Kendrick sat at his desk trying to read, his phone buzzed again. The same unknown number from before. This time, the message was longer. I saw your complaint was denied. I still have the proof. Meet me tomorrow. Library, 7 p.m. Kendrick stared at the screen, heart racing. The note's warning echoed in his head. Don't push it. But if he didn't push, they'd bury him alive. He typed back one word. Okay. Kendrick has received a chilling anonymous note telling him to back off. But at the same time he's about to meet a mysterious person claiming to have proof of the theft. Kendrick arrived at the library at exactly 7 p.m. The tall windows were lit from within, casting warm squares onto the cobbled path below. The sky was already dark, the campus unusually quiet for a Thursday evening. Inside, the smell of old paper and lemon polish greeted him. A familiar comfort, but tonight it felt heavy. He scanned the room. Students hunched over laptops in the main reading area. No one looked up. No one seemed to notice him. Then, in the far corner by the archives room, someone waved, a subtle, almost invisible gesture. Not a student. An older man, worn navy coveralls, a ring of keys clipped to his belt. Kendrick hesitated, then walked over. The man smiled, thin and slow. Mr. Allen, he said, voice low and gravelly. Been watching you. Kendrick blinked. Do I know you? Not yet. Name's Langston. I clean the math building. He reached out a hand, calloused, worn. Kendrick shook it. You think nobody sees you, but I do. Been seeing students like you come and go for decades. You sent the message? Kendrick asked, still unsure. Langston chuckled. No, I don't text. Got a flip phone older than you. But I saw your face after that presentation. Knew that look. Same one I wore in 1968, when they told me my scholarship wasn't renewed, after I started organizing sit-ins. Kendrick folded his arms, not sure where this was going. Langston motioned toward the corner table. Sit. Let me show you something. They sat. From his jacket, Langston pulled out a thin folder, stained at the edges. Inside were photocopies, newspaper clippings, old memos, disciplinary notices. Kendrick leaned in, eyes narrowing. That's me, Langston said. University of Michigan. I was the first black math major they admitted in '65. They loved me until I outscored my professors on a logic exam. He flipped to another page. They claimed I plagiarized from a grad student, took my credits, took my future, just like that. Kendrick stared at the pages. Why are you showing me this? Because it's happening again. Same story, new names. They're not afraid of your mistakes. They're afraid of your brilliance. Langston's voice softened. And I think you already know that. Kendrick nodded slowly. They erased me from my own work. Langston's eyes darkened. I heard, Houston? Aldridge? You think those folks don't talk? He tapped the folder. You think your complaint being dismissed in one day was coincidence? Kendrick exhaled, bitterness curling under his breath. They're protecting each other. Langston nodded. That building may look like marble and gold, but underneath, it's held together by secrets and silence. You're not the first. Won't be the last. Kendrick looked at him. Then what do I do? Just wait for another rejection letter. No. You find leverage, Langston said. Truth's like a blade. Sharp, but only if you know where to aim it. Before Kendrick could ask what he meant, Langston slid something else across the table. A staff access log. Saw this printed and discarded outside Aldridge's office. Thought you might be interested. Kendrick picked it up. It listed dates, names, and computer login times. One entry stood out. Houston, 3:42 a.m. Editing group project. Submission. Timestamped 2 hours after Kendrick had confronted Claire in the hallway. Kendrick stared at the sheet. They changed the file. Or added your work, Langston said. Either way, someone's covering tracks. A silence hung between them. Langston leaned back. You got allies, Kendrick. They just ain't always who you expect. As if on cue, a voice broke the moment. Kendrick? He turned. Claire stood near the column, her expression unreadable. She looked out of place in the old library, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair tied up hastily, as if she'd rushed here. Langston stood slowly. Time for an old man to vanish. But remember what I said. He gave Claire a long look, unreadable, then disappeared between the shelves. Claire walked over cautiously. Was that? Kendrick cut her off. Mr. Langston. He's more honest than half the professors here. She dropped her bag into the chair across from him. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure you'd show up, he said. Claire reached into her backpack and pulled out a flash drive. She placed it between them. This is Heston's files. I copied them from his desktop yesterday. He left it unlocked. Kendrick didn't reach for it. Why? Because I saw the file names. The day of the presentation. One was labeled Allen Proofed Draft Final. His breath caught. Claire continued. He didn't even bother renaming it. Kendrick stared at the flash drive like it might explode. You realize what this means? Yeah, she said. But you also realize what happens if I'm caught. You'll get a warning. I'll get expelled. Claire didn't argue. I need to know something. Kendrick said finally. Why are you really helping me? Claire's eyes flickered. Because I'm tired of pretending people like Heston deserve the benefit of the doubt. And because you're the only person in this program who's actually doing original work. He hesitated. You defended them. When they took the credit, you stood there. I froze. Her voice was small. I didn't know what to say, and I was scared. He looked at her, expression unreadable. Scared of what? Of being the one white girl in a group project standing up for the black student they just erased. She looked down. It sounds awful when I say it out loud. But it's true. Kendrick studied her. So what's changed? She looked him in the eye. You're still here, after everything. That matters.
You didn't pick up the flash drive. Not yet. How do I know you didn't steal it to trap me?
You don't, Claire said without flinching. You'll just have to decide if you trust me. The flash drive sat between them, small and weightless, and potentially explosive. Kendrick has to decide whether to use Claire's leaked evidence, knowing it could destroy everything, or finally expose the truth. Kendrick didn't sleep that night. The flash drive sat on his desk like a loaded weapon. He'd placed it there after returning from the library, untouched, its black plastic shell glinting faintly in the lamplight. Brent was out late, leaving Kendrick alone with the decision. Open the files and unleash what could either destroy them or him. By morning the sun hadn't risen, but Kendrick had made up his mind. He plugged the drive into his laptop. The folders loaded instantly. There were 3 main directories: assessments, projects, and internal messages. Kendrick clicked the last one first. Inside was a chain of emails between faculty, Aldridge, Heston, Bowman, and others, all with subject lines like Allen concern, re-verification, adjustment protocol. One email thread stood out. It was dated just after Kendrick's chalkboard breakthrough, on day 1. From P. Huston to Westbridge to J. Aldridge at westbridge.edu. Ella Bowman at westbridge.edu. Subject: Student Allen. As discussed, the student's display in class today raises serious questions. His performance significantly deviates from the cohort average. Considering the optics, we recommend a Level 5 reassessment. Suggest adding constraint to assessment environment. No calculator, full supervision. Kendrick froze. Level 5 reassessment. That wasn't protocol. It was retaliation. Worse, they'd coordinated it. He clicked deeper. Another thread appeared. This one days after the project presentation. From P. Heston at Westbridge to admin and math dep to Westbridge. Subject: Group A submission, revision. Replaced submission with cleaned version. Allen's early model was integrated under new FineLAN. Attribution unnecessary project was submitted as collaborative, cleaned version. No attribution. No mention of Kendrick. His fingers tightened over the trackpad. Then he clicked into the assessments folder. There it was. A PDF labeled Verification Test Level 5 KLN.tft. Opening it revealed a scan of his completed test, every page he remembered, every equation he'd written, and a digital timestamp confirming it had been uploaded within minutes of submission. Beneath it a second document. Scoring rubric, internal use only. He opened it. Each section had a rating from 1 to 5. His scores 5, 5, 5. The highest possible. But in the margin of the form someone had scribbled, high risk, keep outcome, internal. Kendrick sat back in the chair. His heart wasn't racing anymore. It was slow, heavy, cold. He had passed. Not just passed, excelled. And they buried it. He opened the final folder, projects. Inside, multiple versions of the advanced calculus submission. The metadata on the files showed that Kendrick's name had originally been listed in the author field, then removed. The final version was uploaded from Heston's account. The file properties were clear. Modified by Feston. Modified 3:47 a.m. Every piece of evidence was sitting right there. He exhaled. The weight wasn't gone. It had just shifted. Now, it wasn't about proving himself. It was about deciding what to do with the proof. Later that afternoon, as he walked through the quad, Kendrick kept his head down. The paths were full of students, backpacks swinging, laughter rising between classes. None of them knew the storm brewing just beneath the surface. None of them knew that in his bag, Kendrick carried the equivalent of academic dynamite. He sat on a bench beneath a tree and opened his laptop again, this time to write. The email was short, direct, and sent to himself, a backup copy of the evidence in case anything happened. Then he drafted another email, not to the faculty, not to Heston, to the Westbridge student publication. Subject, statement and evidence. Academic suppression at Westbridge. He paused over the send button. Then he didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, he saved it as a draft and shut the laptop. He needed to think. That evening, Claire found him in the study lounge. "You opened it?" she asked, eyes anxious. Kendrick nodded. "Yeah, I opened it. And it's worse than I thought." His voice was quiet but firm. "They coordinated everything. The test, the project, the removal." She sat beside him. "Do you have enough to go public?" He turned to her. "Enough to burn the whole department down." She didn't look shocked. She looked relieved. Kendrick watched her for a moment. "Why'd you do it?" he asked. "Really?" Claire hesitated. "Because I've watched this school reward people for being mediocre and white my whole life. I just never thought I'd be the one helping them get away with it." She rubbed her arms. "I thought I could stay quiet, that I wasn't part of the problem if I didn't actively join in. But silence is part of it." Kendrick nodded once. Claire added, "I'm with you if you go public. I'll put my name on it." He looked at her. "That'll ruin your rep here." She shrugged. "Maybe it deserves to be ruined." The next morning, Kendrick checked his inbox and saw a new notification from the university's central system. A file had been uploaded to his student record. He clicked it. It was a spreadsheet, risk matrix evaluation, class of 2029. A confidential document, likely meant for internal admissions eyes only. Next to his name, highlighted in red, were two phrases: academic anomaly, pending review. Risk perception of overqualification. His stomach turned. Overqualification? That was the threat. He clicked deeper. A note attached by an administrator read, "May trigger faculty discomfort or challenge grading curves. Recommend close monitoring. Do not elevate without approval." It wasn't his performance they doubted. It was the fact he'd performed too well. Kendrick now knows he was flagged not for failure, but for being too intelligent while black. Everything was rigged from the start, and now he has the full paper trail to prove it. Kendrick sat at his desk, staring at the risk matrix evaluation spreadsheet on his screen. The phrase kept echoing in his head like a warning: perception of overqualification. It wasn't just that they feared he couldn't do the work. They feared that he could better faster, deeper than the system was designed to allow from someone like him. He thought of Mr. Langston's words. "They're not afraid of your mistakes. They're afraid of your brilliance." Kendrick closed the file and opened his draft email again, the one addressed to the Westbridge student publication. The evidence was airtight now. Internal grading discrimination, a doctored group project file, coordinated faculty suppression, and now proof of racial profiling baked into admissions evaluation. He reread every line of the message, then hovered over the send button. His finger was a breath away when his phone buzzed. A call. Unknown number. He didn't answer. Then another text, from Claire. "Are you okay? Something's going on." Before he could reply, a hard knock rattled his door. He opened it slowly. Two campus police officers stood in the hallway, one tall and square-jawed, the other short, eyes scanning the room behind Kendrick like he was already guilty. "You Kendrick Allen?" the taller one asked. Kendrick's throat dried. "Yes. We need you to come with us. You match a description." "A description of what?" Kendrick asked, voice steady. The short one spoke up. "Incident reported near the dining hall. Student claimed a suspicious individual was seen loitering near the bike racks." Kendrick frowned. "I've been here all morning. You can ask my roommate." Brent appeared from behind, earbuds out. "Yeah, he hasn't left. What's this about?" "Routine check," the taller officer said, eyes never leaving Kendrick. "Standard protocol." "Do I have to go with you?" Kendrick asked. "If you've got nothing to hide, it won't take long," the shorter one added. They didn't wait for a response. As Kendrick stepped into the hall, Brent called out, "Wait, where are you taking him?" "Campus safety," the officer replied over his shoulder. "He'll be back soon." They walked him across the quad in full view of students heading to class. Kendrick kept his head up, even as whispers rippled behind him. Every step felt heavier than the last. Not from guilt, but from the knowledge of what this looked like. A black student being escorted by police. Again, in the safety office, they asked him to empty his pockets. He complied. Then they asked for his laptop.
Why?
Kendrick asked, tension tightening in his shoulders. Standard procedure, the tall officer said.
For what?
The short one stepped in. Digital verification. We've received a tip about potential unauthorized access to faculty systems. We're investigating a security breach. Kendrick blinked. You think I hacked a professor? We're not accusing anyone. Just checking data, the tall one said. Kendrick didn't move. The short officer added, if you don't surrender it, we'll have to escalate this through the dean's office. Kendrick opened his backpack slowly, pulled out the laptop. As he handed it over, something in him twisted. Not fear but fury held tight in his chest. They took it without a word, then told him to wait. For 2 hours, he sat alone in a white-walled room that smelled like disinfectant and silence. No phone, no watch, just the sound of a ticking analog clock above the door, and the knowledge that his laptop, with every file, every screenshot, every piece of truth, was now in someone else's hands. Finally, a woman in a gray blazer entered. Her smile was tight, polished. Mr. Allen, she said, thank you for cooperating. We've reviewed the preliminary data. Your laptop will be returned after IT completes a compliance check. Kendrick's voice was low. Compliance with what? We can't disclose that, she said smoothly. But rest assured your cooperation is appreciated. You're free to go. He stood. Do I get a report of this? Any documentation? She didn't flinch. This isn't a disciplinary action. Just a safety measure. No paper trail. No charges. Just a message. As he walked out of the office, his fists clenched at his sides. By the time Kendrick got back to his dorm, the campus was buzzing. Not with news of his detainment, that had been neatly concealed, but with a university-wide press release sent to every student and faculty inbox. He opened it. Subject: Campus response to recent allegations. It read, in light of recent concerns regarding academic fairness and faculty integrity, Westbridge University has conducted an internal inquiry. We have found no evidence of systemic racism or procedural misconduct within our departments. Our commitment to diversity remains unwavering. Kendrick stared at the screen, jaw tightening. No evidence. No misconduct. No racism. They had wiped the slate clean before he could even go public. Across the room, Brent looked up from his own laptop. You saw it? Kendrick nodded once. Brent frowned. They're trying to kill the story before it's even told. Kendrick sat down slowly, feeling the weight settle in. They took my laptop. They know. Brent leaned forward. You've still got the files saved, right? In the cloud? Kendrick's face didn't move. They can't erase it, but they're going to try and discredit it. He opened his phone. The backup email was still there, the full package sent to himself. Still secure. Still intact. But the university had made its first move, and it had come dressed in procedure, polished statements, and silence. The university is going public with denials while secretly investigating and silencing Kendrick, setting the stage for a wider confrontation. The press release was meant to silence him. Kendrick knew it the moment he read the last line. We have found no evidence of systemic racism. It was a stamp of finality, a narrative crafted to bury his story before it could breathe. But something inside him refused to die quietly. That night, after Brent had gone to bed, Kendrick sat at his desk, pulled a stack of blank paper toward him, and began to write. Not words, equations. His old refuge, his only weapon. Symbols poured out of him, dense and beautiful, curving like rivers across the page, each line a rebuke to the silence Westbridge tried to enforce. He stayed up until dawn, sheets of math paper covering his desk and floor like snowfall. They couldn't take this from him. They could take his laptop, his name from the project, even his credibility, but they couldn't touch the thing that made him who he was. The next morning, Kendrick scanned the handwritten pages and uploaded them to a new account he'd created. Anonymous, without his name or photo, just an avatar of a chalkboard, and the handle, the real proof. He posted the first set of notes, a derivation of a theorem that had been brewing in his head for weeks, something no one at Westbridge had seen yet. Within hours, the post began to circulate on niche math forums, shared by people who didn't know who he was. only that the work was brilliant. By the third day, the real proof had over 5,000 followers. By the end of the week, commenters debated the identity of the mysterious mathematician. Some speculated it was a postdoc at MIT, others a tenured professor publishing under a pseudonym. No one guessed a 17-year-old freshman. In his dorm room, Kendrick watched the numbers climb. For the first time in weeks, he felt something like freedom. Here in the raw space of ideas, no one could weaponize his skin against him. At least not yet. But Westbridge's faculty couldn't ignore brilliance forever. On a rainy afternoon, Brent burst into the room holding his phone. "Dude, you've got to see this," he said, shoving the screen at Kendrick. It was a video clip from the university's official YouTube channel. Professor Aldridge, standing at a lectern during a faculty symposium, was presenting a new theoretical model. Kendrick recognized it instantly, the same derivation he'd uploaded as the real proof 2 nights earlier. Aldridge spoke calmly, gesturing to equations on a slide. "This is a refinement of work being done in our department," he said, "a collaborative effort that began in one of our advanced seminars. Not a single mention of Kendrick. Not even a nod to a promising student. Just a polished theft, packaged for applause." The comments under the video were glowing. "Brilliant. Innovative. Westbridge is ahead of the curve." Brent swore softly.
He's stealing your stuff.
Kendrick stared at the screen. His chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the air. He had expected retaliation, not open theft. "I knew they'd bury me," he said quietly. "I didn't think they'd do it in public."
What are you gonna do?
Kendrick closed his laptop. "Keep going."
He doubled down.
Every night. More papers. More proofs. More breakthroughs posted anonymously. He stopped sleeping, lost track of meals. His dorm floor became a sea of crumpled drafts. Brent started calling it the war room. One night, as Kendrick uploaded a new derivation, a direct message appeared in his inbox. The sender's handle was a string of numbers. The message read, "I know who you are. Don't stop." Kendrick stared at it for a long time, then typed back, "Why?" No reply came, but the next morning his follower count doubled again. On the 5th night the twist arrived. A well-known math vlogger, someone with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, posted a video titled, "Who is the Real Proof?" The thumbnail showed a chalkboard scribbled with Kendrick's formulas. In the video, the vlogger walked through the work in layman's terms. "This isn't just advanced," she said. "This is paradigm shifting. Whoever is behind this knows things even seasoned researchers haven't published." The comments were wild speculation. MIT, Caltech, NASA. Some joked it was a rogue AI. But then, buried in the thread, one user posted a grainy photo, Kendrick at the chalkboard on his first day of class. The caption, "Same handwriting." The replies were instant. "Holy, it's that kid. Didn't the university say no misconduct? Looks like they're hiding him. Expose Westbridge." Kendrick read every comment. His heart pounded, not with fear but with a strange, rising heat, vindication mixed with dread. The anonymity was cracking. His face was about to attach to his work whether he liked it or not. 2 days later, the dam broke. One of his posts, a new theorem about nonlinear optimization, went viral on Twitter. Not niche math Twitter, but mainstream trending. People outside academia were sharing screenshots of his equations like memes, calling them digital graffiti from a genius ghost. Someone set his formulas to music. Another mocked up t-shirts with his derivations printed on them. And then came the biggest shock of all. Kendrick was eating in the dining hall when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and froze. A verified account had tagged him. Dr. Mason Duval, the most famous black mathematician in the country, a Fields medalist, known for exposing bias in STEM, had posted a tweet.
This work is extraordinary. Whoever the real proof is, they are rewriting the playbook. At NY Times, at ProPublica, at Inside Higher Ed, you should be paying attention. Attached was a screenshot of Kendrick's theorem and the grainy photo of him at the chalkboard. The replies exploded instantly. Thousands of retweets, journalists tagging each other, academics chiming in with following this story. Brent leaned across the table, eyes wide. "You're trending," he whispered, "but not like before. This is different." Kendrick stared at the screen, pulse hammering. He'd wanted to be heard, but not like this. Not exposed, tagged by name, under the gaze of national media. His equations were no longer just math. They were evidence. Kendrick's work has gone viral.
and Dr. Mason Duval has publicly tagged major media outlets, setting off a national spotlight that will collide with Westbridge's cover-up. Kendrick never imagined it would happen in a dining hall. But there he was, sitting at a sticky table next to a tray of untouched spaghetti, watching his world tilt through the cracked screen of his phone. Dr. Mason Duval's tweet had detonated across the timeline. In under 20 minutes, his follower count exploded by thousands. The original post from his The Real Proof account was now embedded in articles, quote tweeted by professors, tech CEOs, even a few celebrities. Brent leaned over his shoulder. Bro, this is it. You just crossed over. But Kendrick didn't feel victorious. He felt exposed. Because now his name was out. Not officially, but enough to connect the dots. The chalkboard photo, the viral theory, the quiet genius the university tried to erase, suddenly made visible to the world. By midnight, his inbox overflowed with messages. Journalists, mathematicians, activists, students from around the country. Some were supportive, others were skeptical, even aggressive. And then one message stood out. From Naomi Fields, senior producer, American Morning Pulse. Subject: feature interview request. We're covering the surge in academic whistleblowing, and your story is at the center. We'd like to offer you a full, live interview to share your experience. Tomorrow morning. Nationwide. Kendrick reread the email 3 times. The network was one of the top national morning shows. Live. Not edited. Not filtered. Live. He shut the laptop, palms sweating. That night, he didn't sleep. Instead, he sat on the floor surrounded by the papers that started it all. Formulas he'd written weeks ago. Some now viral. Others still obscure. He stared at them, tracing each curve of chalk with his eyes. Not for clarity, but for courage. Brent stayed up with him. You gonna do it? I don't know, Kendrick admitted. They tried to bury you. Now the whole country's listening. Kendrick shook his head. But they'll twist it. Say I'm just bitter, angry, unstable. All the old tricks. Brent shrugged. Then be undeniable. At 7:15 a.m., Kendrick entered the video call's green room link. A woman with coiled locks and a warm smile appeared on his screen. Kendrick Allen? She asked. He nodded. I'm Naomi, thank you for trusting us with your story. He looked away for a second. Not sure I do, but I'm out of options. Naomi didn't flinch. That's exactly why we're here. 10 minutes later, the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The segment opened with a polished anchor speaking solemnly. This morning we turned to Westbridge University, and the 17-year-old freshman whose viral math theories have ignited a national reckoning in academic institutions. Kendrick's face appeared on the screen. His voice didn't shake. He told the story from the beginning. The chalkboard challenge, the anonymous post, the group project theft, the altered verification exam, the administrative silence, the internal memo labeling him a perception risk. He didn't scream, didn't rage, just recounted the facts. Calm, precise, relentless. Halfway through the segment, Naomi held up a printed screenshot. This, she said, is a document leaked by a faculty member. An internal risk matrix labeling black students as overqualified optics threats. Kendrick, your name is on it. What does that feel like? Kendrick took a breath. It feels like being punished for brilliance. Like being told that excellence only counts when it comes from the right face. Naomi paused. What do you want, Kendrick? He didn't blink. Accountability, not just for me, for everyone they erased. The interview went viral in real time. Clips circulated within minutes. Twitter threads dissected every line. Activists picked up the story. STEM diversity advocates launched hashtags. And Kendrick was right. And proof of prejudice. Erasure. Westbridge scrambled. By noon, the university's president had issued a second statement. We are initiating a thorough review of our academic protocols. We remain committed to diversity and inclusion. But it was too late. Because former students started coming forward. One by one, tweets surfaced. Screenshots of grading inconsistencies. Emails questioning black students' placement in honors tracks. A 2009 alum posted, "They called me articulate after every presentation. That was code. This is not new." A PhD dropout from 2015 added, "I left after my advisor told me I was too confident for my level." Sound familiar? It wasn't just about Kendrick anymore. It was about the rot beneath the walls of every elite institution that smiled while silencing. That evening, Kendrick sat in his room, still dazed. The glow of the laptop lit his face. Brent had gone silent for the first time in hours. Even Claire had only texted once. "You were brilliant. Be safe." Then a new email appeared. The subject line: opportunity. The sender: people at Pioneer Quant. Kendrick opened it cautiously. "Kendrick, we followed your work, not just the viral pieces. All of it. We recognize your mind, not just your struggle. We're inviting you to join Pioneer Quant's Black Talent Fellowship. Full ride. Relocation. Access to our research teams. No university filter. No academic politics. We don't want to admit you. We want to build with you." His heart stopped for a second. Pioneer Quant. One of the most prestigious AI research firms in the world. They worked with NASA, Tesla, defense departments, and they just offered him a direct line past every gate Westbridge tried to close. No conditions, no assessments, just belief. And then came the kicker. At the bottom of the email was a P.S. "Also, we've secured your test scores, the ones Westbridge never released. You scored higher than any applicant in the last decade. We thought you should know. Kendrick has just received a life-altering offer from a major tech firm, along with the shocking truth that his original scores had been intentionally buried, setting up the power struggle to come." The morning after Kendrick's interview aired, the university campus looked the same. Brick buildings basked in autumn sun, students sipping overpriced coffee, but the air was different. Something had shifted. Kendrick felt it walking across the quad. People stared longer now, some with awe, some with anger. A few nodded quietly as he passed. Others turned away. The media couldn't get enough. Headlines spread like wildfire. "The boy genius the Ivy League tried to erase. Proof of prejudice. What Kendrick Allen exposed about Westbridge. Students' viral theorem sparks national debate on racial bias in academia." National outlets began requesting interviews. Education reform panels asked to quote him. Think tanks offered fellowships. But inside Westbridge, the response was colder. The university board released a formal statement. "In light of recent media attention, Westbridge will initiate a full review of its academic procedures and student equity standards. We maintain confidence in our faculty and processes but welcome transparency." It sounded diplomatic, measured, but behind closed doors, a storm brewed. Kendrick noticed it first in class. Professor Aldridge stopped calling on him entirely. During lectures, Kendrick's raised hand hung in the air unanswered. Students followed Aldridge's lead. Conversations once curious became cautious. No one dared speak too freely around him anymore. At one seminar, Aldridge walked to the board, eyes scanning the room. "Let's talk about overexposure," he said, tone tight. "The danger of mistaking media attention for merit." The class was silent. Kendrick didn't flinch. He knew the message wasn't theoretical. Another class period, Kendrick found one of his math papers returned with a red ink note. "Ambitious, but unfocused. Consider simplifying your approach." It was the same approach that had gone viral days before. The academic pettiness was surgical, and it spread. Dr. Heston, who had once praised Kendrick's early contributions to the group project, now referred to him in faculty circles as emotionally volatile. Claire overheard a conversation in the hallway between two professors debating whether Kendrick had mental health concerns that should have flagged earlier. Even Dr. Bowman, Kendrick's advisor, the one who once offered guidance and gentle praise, had gone silent. He stopped answering emails. His office door was always closed. The message was clear. Kendrick wasn't just inconvenient. He was dangerous. And still, Kendrick didn't stop. He continued publishing under his own name. Now, not the real proof. He began a weekly live stream, where he walked through his math breakthroughs, solving problems on camera, inviting others to submit challenges. It wasn't about the fame. It was about reclaiming visibility on his terms. But visibility, as always, came at a cost. On a Wednesday evening, Claire knocked on his door. She looked tense, a folded paper in her hand. "They're circling," she said, barely above a whisper. Kendrick motioned her in. She handed him the paper. This was pinned outside the graduate staff room. Someone tore it down, but I took a copy. It was a memo, unmarked, anonymous, titled, "The Kendrick Allen Dilemma, Managing Student Disruption While Preserving Public Image." Lines stood out like cuts. "The student exhibits extreme behavior, indicating a possible craving for recognition more than scholarly discipline. Continued attention-seeking may erode faculty authority." Options for addressing the issue must balance institutional optics with firm academic consequences. Kendrick read the memo twice. His voice was flat. They're painting me as unstable. Claire nodded. They're building a paper trail, so if they push you out, they can say it wasn't about race, just behavior. Kendrick folded the paper. You think the board knows? They started the investigation, Claire said. But they're just buying time. Meanwhile, the professors are writing the ending they want. Later that night, Kendrick received a new email from Westbridge Student Affairs. Subject, formal conduct warning. Academic and public engagement. The message was brief. Mr. Allen, in light of your recent public statements and media appearances, and due to their impact on classroom dynamics and faculty relations, we are issuing a formal conduct warning. Future public comments that negatively affect the academic environment may result in review for disciplinary action, including but not limited to suspension or expulsion. No hearing. No conversation. Just a warning. Framed like concern, but laced with threat. Kendrick stared at the email for a long time. Then he forwarded it to Brent, Claire, and Mr. Langston, without a message. The subject line said enough. 10 minutes later, Langston replied with one sentence. They've done this before, but not to someone who can prove it in real time. But the real twist came 2 days later. Kendrick was scheduled to join a roundtable with other black students at a nearby university, a panel discussing institutional racism in STEM. Nothing inflammatory. Just honest dialogue. Hours before the event, he received a call from the host. I'm so sorry, Kendrick, the woman said, voice tight. But we've been told if we proceed with the event featuring you as a panelist, Westbridge will pull its funding to our joint research lab. Kendrick was stunned. Wait, they're threatening other schools now? We're not canceling, she said quickly, but we need to make you virtual. Off campus. Kendrick clenched his jaw. You're protecting the lab. I get it. This isn't about you, she said gently. But they both knew it was. He logged into the panel from his dorm room, the screen lighting up with students from across the country. He was calm, articulate, thoughtful, and at the end he said, they want me to be quiet because I make them uncomfortable. But maybe discomfort is the first step toward truth. Because silence isn't neutrality, it's complicity. When the panel ended, his inbox lit up with supportive messages. But so did his university portal. A new alert. Conduct status updated. One more infraction may result in formal expulsion proceedings. Kendrick is now officially one statement away from being removed from Westbridge, and the stakes have never been higher, as public support and institutional suppression collide. The invitation arrived as if nothing had happened. It came via email, crisp, formal, written with administrative polish. Dear Mr. Allen, we are pleased to inform you that you've been nominated to represent Westbridge University at the National Collegiate Mathematics Symposium in New York City. This honor reflects your exceptional aptitude and the university's continued commitment to academic excellence. Travel and accommodations will be provided. We ask that you confirm your participation and agree to the enclosed terms of representation. Kendrick sat back in his chair, rereading the last line. He opened the attachment. The terms weren't academic guidelines. They were silence, dressed up in legalese. All public statements regarding Westbridge University shall be coordinated through the Office of Communications. Participant agrees not to reference personal disputes, faculty conduct, or internal evaluations during the symposium. Failure to adhere may result in withdrawal of invitation and review of academic standing. In plain English, you can go, but shut up. It was the most prestigious undergrad math event in the country. Invitations were rare. For most students, it meant automatic grad program interest, research partnerships, publication offers. It was a golden key. Kendrick stared at the screen, hands clenched. The irony was surgical. Westbridge wanted him to showcase the same brilliance it tried to erase, but without mentioning the price of survival. A knock on the door broke the silence. Claire stepped in, face tight. You got the email? He nodded once. They're not even hiding it, she said. Nope. She sat down beside him. Are you going? Kendrick looked at the laptop. If I do, I become the poster boy they wanted all along. Quiet, grateful, exceptional, but manageable. And if you don't? She asked softly. They say I threw away an opportunity. He paused. And maybe I do. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he walked campus alone, tracing the path between his dorm and the lecture hall, where it all began, where he first stood at the board, chalk in hand, solving a problem no one expected him to touch. The university had tried to reduce him to that moment. The math prodigy with no backstory, no voice, no protest. And now they were offering him a stage, on the condition that he wear the costume they stitched for him. The next morning, Kendrick walked into the dean's office, invitation in hand. Dean Rutledge looked up, her smile diplomatic. "Kendrick, we're pleased you were selected. It's a testament to your growth." Kendrick sat down. "Let's not pretend this is about growth." The smile didn't fade. "You're an asset. This is a way forward. A public reset. Everyone wins." "No," Kendrick said. "Only you win. I keep my mouth shut. You get to brag about me without owning what you did." Rutledge folded her hands. "You have a choice, Kendrick. You can keep fighting, or you can move forward. Use the opportunity." He stood. "I'll go," he said. "But on my terms." Rutledge didn't flinch. "That's not the agreement." "It is now," Kendrick said. "You need me on that stage more than I need this school." He left without waiting for a response. 2 days later, he was on a flight to New York. Claire had helped him prepare. Brent made sure he packed right. Langston gave him a list of black mathematicians who'd once stood on stages like this, silent under pressure. But Kendrick didn't plan to be silent. The conference was massive, held in a glass tower across from Central Park, banners of universities lining the entrance. Attendees wore sharp suits, sleek glasses, and name badges like trophies. Kendrick said Westbridge University, Kendrick Allen. Just like they wanted. He stood alone backstage as speakers filtered in. Professors and prodigies. A few students looked his way, recognizing him from the interview. One nodded quietly, another avoided his eyes. Then a hand tapped his shoulder. It was a woman, black, early 40s, firm grip. "You, Kendrick?" He nodded. She handed him a flash drive. "They gave you the slides, right?" "Yeah." She lowered her voice. "Double-check them before you go up." Kendrick frowned. "Why?" She didn't answer. Just said, "Trust your instincts. They didn't fly you out to tell the whole truth." 10 minutes before his slot, he stepped into the speaker's prep room and plugged the flash drive into a laptop. The presentation opened smoothly. Title slide. University logo. His name in bold. He clicked forward. Slide 2. The Allen convergence method. His theory in full. But then in the footer he saw it. Presented by Department of Mathematics, Westbridge University. No name. No Kendrick Allen. His authorship had been scrubbed. He scrolled further. Diagrams labeled as departmental research contributions. Comments from Aldridge and Heston in the notes section. As if they'd written. His chest tightened. His name was gone. Again. This wasn't just control. This was erasure. Made public. A voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Allen, you're on in 5. Kendrick stared at the screen. He reached into his bag and pulled out his notebook. The original copy, handwritten. The one he'd posted as the real proof. Then he deleted the presentation. Every slide. He opened a new document. Blank white screen. And typed, "Let me tell you what they didn't want me to say." When he walked onto the stage, the applause was polite, curious. He looked out at a crowd of hundreds, scholars, students, researchers, press. He didn't flinch. "My name is Kendrick Allen," he began, voice even. "And I'm not here to give you a polished university talk. I'm here to tell you how systems designed to reward intelligence will rewrite you out of history the moment you threaten their comfort." He clicked the first slide. A scanned image of his original proof. "This is mine," he said. "It was developed in a dorm room at 3 a.m. after Westbridge accused me of cheating, erased me from a group project, and tried to frame my silence as professionalism." He told the story, all of it. The chalkboard, the test, the erased files, the threats, the warning letter, the offer with strings. People stopped typing. The room went quiet. "This is not about one school," he said. "It's about what happens when black brilliance refuses to stay in the margins." He closed his laptop. "I was told to choose between dignity and opportunity. I chose truth." The applause came slowly at first, then like a wave. A woman in the second row stood, then another. By the end of the room, half the audience was on their feet. Backstage, a university representative watched, face pale. As Kendrick walked off stage, someone shoved a tablet into his hand. It was streaming Westbridge's live social media feed. The university's official account had gone silent mid-speech. Then, just minutes ago, they tweeted, "We are proud of Kendrick Allen's contributions, and will be reviewing our faculty practices in full transparency." It was damage control. Too late. because the final slide had been screen capped. Circulating now under the hashtag Gone, let me tell you, Kendrick just dismantled the university's narrative live on stage. And now the public backlash is accelerating. The auditorium had never been so silent. Kendrick stood at the podium, hands planted on either side. His laptop closed now. No more slides, no polished visuals, no disclaimers. Just him, a microphone, and the weight of every word he was about to say. My name, he began slowly, is Kendrick Allen. He paused. The name echoed across the auditorium. For the first time, it sounded like it belonged. I came to Westbridge University at 17. Not through favors, not through handouts, but through proof. My math scores were higher than any applicant in 10 years. Gasps rippled through the audience. A few phones came out, screens glowing. But when I got there, Kendrick continued, I was skipped during roll call. I was asked to prove my ability in front of an entire class. And when I did, I was accused silently, then publicly, of cheating. His voice trembled slightly, but he didn't look away. The next week, I was removed from a group project I helped design. They used my ideas. They removed my name. They got top marks. I got silent. Behind him, on the big screen, someone projected a scanned page from his notebook. His original handwritten theorem. Below it, a time-stamped screenshot of the group's submitted project. Same diagram, same formula, different attribution. A murmur spread through the crowd. This wasn't theory anymore. This was evidence. And when I complained, Kendrick said, they dismissed it. He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a printed email. This, he said, holding it up, is a letter from Westbridge's Office of Academic Integrity. It says, quote, we found no evidence of misconduct, end quote. The audience shifted, visibly uneasy. But here's the truth, Kendrick continued, voice gaining strength. I found the emails, the meeting notes, the redacted assessments. I found the grading rubrics that were altered. I found the internal spreadsheet that flagged me as a risk of overqualification. A risk. On cue, another slide appeared behind him, the leaked risk matrix, Kendrick's name circled in red. And I wasn't the first. I spoke out, and others came forward, years of it. Stories buried beneath GPAs and scholarship pamphlets. He took a deep breath. This isn't about one classroom. This is about an entire institution that rewards mediocrity when it comes in the right package, and penalizes genius when it doesn't. The room was frozen. Every eye was locked on him. Phones were recording from every angle now. Kendrick stepped forward, his voice quieter but more cutting. I was warned, not with fists, but with formal warnings, emails, surveillance, even campus police stops. He looked straight into the audience now. I was told not to push it. A pause. I'm pushing. The crowd stirred. He continued. So let me name what they tried to erase. He walked away from the mic, picked up a stack of papers, and returned. Professor Peter Heston uploaded my project files under his name. Gasps. Professor James Aldridge coordinated my verification assessment with questions from graduate texts, then suppressed the results when I aced it. More gasps. Dean Lorraine Rutledge offered me a national stage if I promised not to speak. Behind him, each name and act appeared in sequence, projected in stark white font against a black screen. Claire, who had flown out to attend, sat in the front row, tears in her eyes. Kendrick held up the final page, the university's press release denying systemic racism. This, he said, shaking it lightly, was published after they saw my scores, after they confiscated my laptop, after they cut me off from every group and told the world there was no wrongdoing. He let the paper fall to the floor. Then, for a moment, he said nothing. The silence was louder than anything. Finally, he stepped forward again. I'm not here to destroy Westbridge, he said. I'm here to save the people like me, who haven't made it this far, the ones who drop out after year one. The ones who are told brilliance only counts if it's quiet. He stared out into the room. My voice shakes, he said, but I will not break.
Then he stepped back.
No music played. No moderator appeared. Just silence. And then applause. Slow at first. Then building. Swelling. Roaring. People stood. Hands clapping. Tears falling. Phones raised. Voices shouting. Say his name. Kendrick Allen. And then, as the screen behind him faded, someone backstage rushed forward. A staff member waving frantically at the tech booth. Cut the stream, she whispered. Now. But it was already too late. In the audience, a grad student had been live broadcasting the entire speech from her phone, multi-angled, captioned in real time, uploaded before Kendrick even walked off stage. It was already online. Hundreds of thousands were watching. Within minutes, the full speech was trending under a new banner, naming what they erased the university's attempt to censor Kendrick's speech. Fails spectacularly. When the dust settled, and the world turned its eyes away, Kendrick Allen found a path beyond retaliation and silence. His transfer to Hawthorne University came quietly, almost under the radar. The pioneer quant offer had given him the freedom to choose, not because he needed them, but because he recognized that a system built to erase him would always hold power over him if he stayed. Hawthorne's offer was full scholarship, no strings, full respect. They knew his story, they saw the brilliance. They didn't demand he stay silent about the path. Kendrick stepped onto the Hawthorne campus in late summer. The air smelled of fresh grass and hope. He walked through the wrought iron gates, suitcase in hand, and felt for the first time in months like the wind was at his back, instead of against him. There, he settled into a new lab, surrounded by faculty who were curious, respectful, even awed. He was no longer that kid who sued his way into attention. He was just Kendrick, mathematician, researcher, rising. The past was not erased, but it was no longer the only story. At Hawthorne, his work flourished. He published papers under his own name. He mentored underprivileged students. He helped develop scholarship programs for Black and Latinx youth in STEM. His story became a curriculum case study in education departments across the country. The Kendrick Allen model. How institutions respond to disruption. He gave guest lectures. He sat in panels. He spoke about formula. Yes, but also about survival. About what it costs to speak truth in places designed to silence you. Years passed. The world moved forward, but his name never dimmed. Professors at Westbridge were quietly reassigned or pushed into retirement. The university's board publicly acknowledged the scandal, issued reparative measures, rewrote faculty evaluation policies, and created external oversight committees. Some celebrated it as progress, others criticized it as too little too late, but none could fully bury the story. Then came the invitation. It arrived on embossed stationery, and with a delicate expectation, Westbridge University cordially invites Kendrick Allen to return, not as the student they tried to erase, but as the keynote speaker for its 2000th anniversary celebration. The letter was polite, reverent. It spoke of reconciliation, of honoring the brilliant young mind once wronged, of restoring voices historically silenced. Kendrick stared at it for a long time. Claire texted, "Is this your chance to reclaim the hall?" Brent called and said, "Show them your name still matters." Mr. Langston's single message said, "Go home." He flew back. The quad of Westbridge gleamed with nostalgia and tension. The banners that once invited him in, now welcomed him back on their terms. On the night of the keynote, the hall was packed. Alumni, faculty, current students, the stage had the old look. Chandeliers, mahogany podium, Westbridge's emblem behind him. This time, he wasn't a guest. He was the point. Before he walked on, Claire slipped into the audience. Brent stood somewhere near the back, and Langston, too frail now to travel, watched online, waiting. Kendrick stepped to the mic. His presence filled the hall. His voice rang out. He told the full story again, not in the same words but with a full heart. He named names. He exposed protocols. He showed slides of his original proofs, screenshots of internal memos, the erased attribution of his research, and the risk matrix that flagged him as an optic threat. He didn't ask for apology. He demanded accountability. He called for structural change, for power shifting to students, for transparency in grading, for protecting dissent. The audience listened. Some nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. Some muttered. Cameras rolled. Live feeds spilled out to social platforms. Westbridge's press center was once again scrambling. But the difference this time was that everyone listening, even those who once ignored him, saw him as the author of his own future. Not victim, not footnote, but force. As he finished, the applause came in waves. He paused. He looked across the audience. His old lecture rooms, his past, his fight, and he spoke one more time. Never think they can erase you if you refuse to stay among the shadows. He walked off the stage. The lights dimmed, the hall still echoing. But as he passed the exit doors, something caught his eye. A young black student sat alone in the back, pen in hand, notebook open, face illuminated by a phone screen. He looked small, quiet, nervous, eyes flicking upward at Kendrick as he left. For a moment, time slowed. That student, just like Kendrick once had been, sat on the threshold of recognition, and Kendrick felt something like a calling. He paused in the wings, half turned back. He didn't walk away. Instead, he stepped back into the hall, toward the student. Their eyes met, because some voices can't be silenced. Because names, once spoken, echo. Because you don't stay erased, if you refuse it. Kendrick's gaze finds a new young student, and the cycle threatens to begin again, demanding his presence, his voice, and possibly another fight ahead. Some stories don't end in headlines, they end in silence. But silence is how injustice survives. If this story made you feel anything, the anger, the heartbreak, the truth behind the mask,